a nugget that gave odds to many professionals. An artistic technique which outstanding artists did not dare to use. The National Museum of Ukrainian Folk Decorative Arts. Its inception was facilitated by the opening of another institution, Kyiv City Museum of Antiques and Arts, and its development was facilitated by expeditions that took place almost all over Ukraine. Once a miserable collection in another museum turned into a full-fledged independent institution. Paper, watercolor. On a small piece of paper, some flowers are placed, and among them is a lion decorated with whimsical ornaments and painted blue. The blue lion. It is a small painting, watercolor, such a traditional posture, an image of a beast in profile. It is a single scene painting, even a bit schematic. We see that this is a beast, a lion. Its mane seemingly stretches down its entire back. Lions never have such big manes. The blue lion is a typical work of the initial period of creativity of Maria Prymachenko. If we talk about her first works, then of course their scale is slightly smaller and they have darker colors. How did the works change over the life of the artist? Why were her first paintings dominated by darker colors? And what myth continues to circulate in art circles even 20 years after the death of the artist? One of the most famous Ukrainian artists, Maria Avksentievna Prymachenko, was born in the village of Bolotna in the Kyiv Oblast. Although the artist was born in a creative family, the parents and relatives hardly expected that their daughter would rise to become an artist. Her father was a carpenter and her mother embroidered well. From a young age, they taught their embroidery and how to make gingerbread. But today researchers are convinced that the little Maria was destined to become a great artist when she grew up. Perhaps since her birth, or maybe even in her mother's womb, Maria Prymachenko, say at a subconscious level, had already been gaining the experience that she would later embody in her art. Her first recognition came in her childhood. When she was shepherding geese in a meadow near a river, she was drawing flowers in the sand and suddenly she saw blue clay. She collected some of that blue clay and drew her house with it. That creativity of hers was seen by neighbors and fellow villagers, and they started inviting her to their homes with great pleasure.
Марійка, ти можеш нам так хату розмалювати?
Так, зможу, тітко Олено.
Ну, то приходь завтра, я тобі гостинчика дам.
Добре, прийду, тільки в батьків спитаю.
By the child's first success was marred by misfortune. First, her grandmother did not appreciate the creativity of her granddaughter. Maria hung some of her grainy scarves, so the grandmother got very angry at her, or maybe she got frightened. But I think it was polio.
інфекція. Вона захворіла поліомієлітом.
To some extent, the great artist repeated the fate of the great poetess Lesa Ukrainka. Since their childhood, these two great women had to fight a disease. The disease deprived Prymachenko childhood joys. While her peers were playing barely break, Maria had to stay at home. But in that difficult situation, the young girl still found a positive side of life for herself that was embodied in art. She drew and she embroidered. One relative invited her to Ivankiv, where there were embroidery workshops. At the age of 20, Maria began working in those very same workshops. Right there, at those workshops, the creativity of the artist manifested itself, which later became the calling card of her works. Maria Avksentievna worked not only for orders, but also embroidered compositions that she had invented herself. The works of the artist amazed the customers. In 1935, her work amazed one of those customers that once and for all changed the fate of Maria Prymachenko.
Хто вишивав ці рушники? Є в нас одна дівчина в Болотні. Марію її звати.
So in 1935, Kiev artist Tatiana Floru saw Maria's work at a small local market in Ivankiv. Her attention was drawn to the young girl's original works, so she decided to meet with Maria Prymachenko.
Марію Примаченко.
Я неодмінно маю з нею познайомитися.
Обов'язково.
І коли в 30
And when the first experimental workshops were organized and opened in Kiev in 1935 to prepare for the first Republican exhibition of folk art, Maria Prymachenko was invited to Kiev.
Примаченко запросили до Києва.
Maria had the opportunity to see a different part of the world than the village, where she grew up and then worked, Bolotnaya. She came to Kiev. It was difficult for her given the illness she was ailing from.
Ці майстерні були цікаві ще тим, що
Those workshops were also interesting because professional artists worked with them. There were whole lectures and a series of studies. There were also Rakinsky, Kasyan, and Derigas. That is, very well-known artists communicated with the masters of the workshops.
Там вона познайомилася з видатними.
There she met outstanding national craftsmen, the likes of Wan Hanchar and many others who I believe also influenced her consciousness. Here in the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, where the creative workshops were located, something appeared that captivated the whole world for almost a century. In Kiev, Maria Prymachenko painted her famous fantastic animals for the first time.
їй сказали,
There she was told to paint the way she knew, so she started painting not flowers or some vases, but animals. They were fantastic animals and birds.
звірів, птахів.
The artist painted with watercolors and small sheets of paper approximately 30 by 40 centimeters in size. The very first of her works amazed the people around her incredible artistic techniques.
Наскільки вона відчуває
How well she felt the line. That is, she outlined the whole shape with one line. She created there and now. Her lines were very light and smooth. What is also interesting is that she also painted her beasts and decorated them with ornaments. The rhythm of those ornaments is quite amazing and very intriguing. In fact, her entire thought process was very interesting.
от цікаво вона мислила.
Ornaments painted by Maria Prymachenko produced an amazing effect. Even at first glance, evil animals decorated with stars and flowers became different and were perceived quite differently. Among her works was a small painting, The Blue Lion. Subsequently, it was transformed into large canvases and wide stories, including her work Oak Broken by a Lion. The work, which together with others brought the artist a high award. Those who saw the works of the rural nugget that is Maria Prymachenko was surprised by her rampant imagination. People could not understand how the artist was able to create such strange animals, and this precisely what gave rise to one of the most common myths about the artist's work that still exists to this very day. They say that she had never visited the zoo, but she actually had done just that. She saw crocodiles, monkeys, and lions. She just had associations with the scene, which gave her the impetus to create some very interesting compositions. The beasts from Bolotnaya, as they're also called, were shown in Kiev at the first Republican exhibition of folk art in 1936. Maria Prymachenko's paintings went from the capital of Ukraine to Moscow and St. Petersburg.
В неї настільки була
She had such a wild fantasy that she created a whole series of fantastic animals throughout the entire year of 1936.
фантастичних звірів.
In 1937, the world saw the fantastic beasts of Maria Prymachenko. They were presented at the International Exhibition in Paris along with the works of other renowned artists.
Вже тоді на них
Even back then, these works were already noticed for the artist's originality, fantasy, and tireless and in some way highly positive vision on the world.
позитивним баченням світу.
The works of the Ukrainian artists have amazed even famous artists of visual art. One of the most outstanding artists of the 20th century, the Spaniard Pablo Picasso, called the works of Maria Prymachenko beautiful works of a brilliant woman. And the French avant-gardist of Belarusian origin, Marc Chagall, was also imbued with what he saw when he started painting animalistics very similar to those of Maria Prymachenko in his paintings. He called them the cousins of the strange beasts of Maria Avksentievna. The organizers of the exhibition themselves appreciated her works.
І були відзначені і
They were also celebrated by a prize. She was one of the first to receive the title of Master of Folk Art. That is, it was something of the highest degree. Her work was not just that of a master, but that of a true master of folk art. Education in the Lavra was an outlet for the artist. After all, before that, she never left her native Bolotnaya. Kiev helped the artist to establish not only a creative life, but also a personal one.
тут в Києві. Є
She had an operation here in Kiev, which allowed her to walk better. She met her fiancé here, a lieutenant of the Soviet army named Vasil Marinchuk.
армії Василя Марінчука.
А ви звідки родом?
Я з села Болотня.
З Болотні?
Так.
З Подовакіно?
Так.
Не може бути. У мене ж матір звідти.
Серйозно?
Серйозно. А я виріс у сусідньому селі.
Який тісний світ.
Так, а давно ви звідти переїхали?
For Vasil's sake, Maria left Kiev. The young couple started living together in Bolotnaya. But then the war broke out. First the Finnish War and then World War II, from which Vasil never returned. She was pregnant at the time. She only managed to write a letter to him about the child, and then when she realized that her husband would not return, she embroidered flowers against a black background on a tablecloth. Embroidery was the only art that Maria Avksentievna was engaged in during the war. She did not even pick up tassels. Watch in the next program.
У неї змінюється
The scale of her works was changing. She began painting on a large canvases, and not with watercolors, but with gouache.
гуашу.
Well, you see, the dark colors, as I said, were apparently because of those events that she had to go through and because of the tragedy in her life. In 1966, Maria Avksentievna showed a large series at an exhibition which she called For People's Joy.
Радість.